Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Epay Tips and Changes webinar. This one's for the week of February the 15th. So as we get started today, as always, make sure that let everyone know that you are muted on this current webinar. We ask that all questions go through the Go-To webinar question area of the control panel, and I am watching those as they come in, and I will address those at the appropriate time. Now, also, as I mentioned in our previous webinars, we are recording this session. So following this session, I will be making it available via Gateway, or you can just go to YouTube and search for the phrase Epay for ISS Facility Services, and you'll be able to watch all this recorded webinar as well as others on a variety of different topics we've done over the last several weeks. So today's topics are going to cover three key areas. First one is the overtime process. We're going to start there and kind of discuss that because we have some issues out in the field kind of that relate to overtime. So we're going to first go in there. We're going to talk about how and why does Blueforce calculate OT. Then we're going to go in and talk about the OT move and the regular OT rate types that are out there. And we're actually going to talk about also the OT charging to employees' non-default job. It's a setting we have out there. I want to talk about that a little bit so everyone kind of understands where that's coming from. Then we're going to go into a quick discussion, actually a very quick discussion on reprocessing timesheets, kind of the purpose behind that process. And they're going to wrap up our call today with a look at some of the different alerts that are available in the system. And I'll guarantee you that the alerts are real time. They're easy to be set up. I'm going to go through some of the benefits of actually taking advantage of that system setup that we have available for you. So let's get started with our first topic today, and that's basically the overtime rules and basically overtime process. So first off, how and why does Blueforce calculate overtime the way it does? First and foremost, as everyone knows, and just kind of my disclaimer here, obviously the federal overtime provisions are contained based on the FLSA, which is basically the Fair Labor Standards Act, and from that, non-exempt employees, which are typically most of our field staff, this FLSA Act, this Fair Labor Standards Act, requires that overtime pay be at least 1.5 times an employee's regular rate of pay after 40 hours of work in a work week. Now, based on what I just mentioned, this is actually a federal law. This is not an ISS law or a ME law. This is actually a federal law that says that we have to pay it at least 1.5 times. Now, hang on, there's some exceptions to that or some additions to that, which now goes into the state laws because some states have their own overtime laws. Now, in cases where an employee is subject to both state and federal overtime laws, the employee is entitled to overtime according to the higher standard. So basically, the example here is the standard that will provide the higher overtime pay. So once again, we do understand a few states out there have their own overtime rules, and that's perfectly fine. But we all have at least a minimum standard going into this nice little convoluted puzzle sometimes. Now, even on top of the states, we have obviously the federal, we have the state. We also have some union contracts with CBAs that are out there that affect this nice equation. So essentially, the FLSA provides the ground floor requirements, and once again, that's just the bare minimums that we have to abide by. But however, businesses must pay its employees at least a federal minimum wage or the state minimum wage if it's higher, and businesses must always basically abide by that federal overtime rule or rate. Now, the collective bargaining agreements, which are done with these unions, can actually provide a different rate in limited situations. So we do understand there's a lot of CBAs involved, and that's why we abide by those. So, for example, the CBA may define overtime as working more than 35 hours a week, which happens on a couple of our sites. However, if an employee works 36 hours, that employee must be paid that overtime wage listed in the collective bargaining agreement. Now, however, that OT rate does not necessarily have to be 1.5 times the employee's wage because the rate only applies for work performed beyond 40. So I stress that because we have a couple collective bargaining agreements that say, if they work at least 35 hours a week, it's considered OT, but they don't necessarily get the time and a half. So in that scenario, the time and a half really only applies at a minimum at 40 or greater, unless otherwise written. So the federal rule says 40 or greater. Obviously, the rate in the CBA could be higher or lower. That's all depending on whatever agreement was made with the union. So kind of from an overtime standpoint, that's kind of the basis I want to address. I think most of us know these rules, and those that are close to the unions and also know the union rules that are available out there, or the CBAs and kind of how they're written up. But to go further more into this, in general, overtime cannot be ignored. And I want to stress that because we've seen many situations where time is being purposely altered to not pay the employee the overtime. Now, obviously, that is a big no-no because now we have the Department of Labor getting involved, in which now they can now find us guilty of those scenarios of us actually shorting an employee or not paying overtime. We are then subject to fines and to remedy the situation, and obviously that is very expensive for the company to do so. So basically, if the employee works overtime, they're entitled to that, and there really is no exceptions to that rule. Now, more so, the question becomes, so we know the kind of the whys. Now, how does Blueforce calculate this, or how does Blueforce know to go in there and charge overtime where we're expecting it to? So the thing behind Blueforce is I kind of mentioned on last week's webinar, for those that mentioned it, and the same screenshot from last week's webinar, is the overtime policy, and basically the pay group setup screen. Now, this is a screen you don't actually have visibility to now, and you probably won't ever, because this is actually a sensitive area. If we mess something up, it could really do a whole domino effect through that pay group. But essentially, we go in here, we take these rules that we've just kind of gone over in this call, kind of go through the federal and state requirements. We look at if there's any union requirements, and we create a pay group in which now we go in there and build this overtime policy. So the question we always get is, why is, John Smith, my employee, getting, overtime, after 35 hours when the state rule says 40? Well, kind of going back in the setup, we set up to show after 35 because we had a union agreement or a CBA in place. Or why is my employee getting overtime after 8 hours when it's a 40-hour federal rule? Well, your employee works in California, and California says after 8 hours in a day, you pay them overtime, or 40 in a week. So you got a kind of a dual, kind of a state scenario built in there. But all that we've built into this overtime policy and the pay group setup, and that's where the system is automatically looking. Now, kind of going into that, I will talk about the system calculation, or how it's calculating it, because it becomes very important to understand where you look at for overtime. We had a user recently, and I never say names on these calls, but a user recently that actually was having a concern that they were looking at the time card screen and couldn't find overtime. Well, one of the things I always mention on these webinars is that the time card screen is strictly an area where you can actually see the raw punches flow in. So kind of the raw punches jumping in, or employees punches in, punches out, they're recorded in the time card view. Now, as the time gets completed in the time card view and gets sent over to the timesheet view, during that process is when the rules are being applied. So when you go to the timesheet view now, and I'll show you here in the next slide, you will see overtime listed. So don't fret if you don't see anything on the time card side, because that's not how the system is generated or to work. It should always show on the timesheet view. So in saying this, the overtime rules that we have in the system calculate automatically all the overtime that's needed to be paid. No user intervention is required. And lastly, remember, this example right here shows you what overtime will look like on a timesheet view, especially after a 40-hour work week. So if I look here in this particular screenshot, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the employee is pretty darn close to overtime. He's at 37 hours. Works Friday, and during his shift on Friday, the system notes that he hits overtime. So that's why the first 3 hours of his day on Friday are noted as regular. Obviously, everything after that 40-hour period on Friday is overtime, so that's why the 6 hours is recorded separately on a separate line. And the system breaks it out this way so you can quickly note how much is regular versus that overtime rate. Now, one of the things that comes into mind all the time is, I understand now how it calculates, but I really need this time to show up with overtime. Now, we do understand that there's times around the business that you basically tell the employee, if you stay an extra 2 hours here, we'll make sure it's a time and a half. That way, it's to your advantage to stay. That extra 2 hours help us out. In cases like that, I know that overtime is promised, and that's perfectly fine. However, the system at that point doesn't jump in to necessarily do anything from a calculation standpoint, because we've told it we have certain rules in play. We do have a couple functions in the system that allow you to basically kind of dictate where that overtime works. So if an employee works the 40 hours in a week, you want to make sure that any extra time they work goes to the proper job, we can kind of move it around. We can have the system automatically do that for us in a different method. So kind of where I'm going with this is the use of rate types. Now, first off, one of the things you're going to notice in the system is when you go into a time card view, just as I'm showing here on the screen, the time card view has an option to go and edit the time card, which allows you to now hit the drop down to basically see the different rate types that are available. And there's one on that rate type list called overtime. Now, the one that's listed as overtime, as a note here in big green letters, we will never use overtime rate type. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and I'll explain this shortly. But the overtime rate type is a rate type that basically will allow you to force all the time on that given time card or timesheet, this is in the timesheet view, as being overtime. It's a very dangerous rate type because basically, like I said, it forces everything. If you're not paying attention, lo and behold, the employee just got overtime for some or not all of their time for that week. So once again, it should never be used, and it is hard-coded, and that's why we can't remove it from Blueforce. So part of the program requires that we have a couple basic rate types, i.e. regular, that's the kind of the one we always use, also an overtime. Overtime in this case cannot be removed from the system. So that's what we're asking you, just to ignore it and do not use it. So what's the alternative here? If I need to kind of, push some time over to overtime, how can I do that? So the alternative to this, there is a rate type on the same drop-down list, and it's called OT Move. Okay? And shown down here at the bottom of my screenshot, down at the bottom of the screen, you will see OT Move available on the drop-down list. Now, OT Move, to kind of use OT Move, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go into the Edit Time Card screen. You're going to get the same window down at the very bottom of my screen here. And you're going to go to that rate type drop-down, hit the drop-down, and pick OT Move. Now, OT Move then requires you to then put a reason code because we want to note why you're making a change to the rate type. Now, what we're doing here is perfectly legal, is perfectly fine. All we're doing is telling the system to kind of move the rate type from regular to OT Move. Now, the reason code here would be correct codes, just because we're actually going in there to correct the associated code. In this case, it's the rate type. Now, once again, this OT Move takes the place of the overtime rate type that's out there, so we'll never use overtime, the actual rate type called overtime. This rate also allows you to control overtime situations. So the purpose of OT Move here is to basically say if, and once again, only if, the employee hits overtime, basically per what we have set up in the system, then treat this time that we've marked as OT Move as OT first before applying it as Blueforce normally would otherwise. So, for example, if I have an employee working on Monday, and he works his 8 hours, and he needs to, stay over 2 more hours, so just 2 additional hours to help us finish up a floor. We can actually mark those two extra hours via edit time card. We can actually enter those 2 extra hours as OT Move. And as the week progresses, if he works 8 hours Monday through Friday, On Friday, he's going to hit 42 hours. Okay? What typically is going to happen is if he works multiple different jobs throughout that week, OT Move is going to save you some grief, because OT Move allows you to tell the system, this job is where I want that OT to appear if this employee hits overtime. And the reason we do this is because, for example, if you look at this screen, he's got, I'm circling here in green, his job on this time is 100 My Main Office. Okay? We use OT Move because maybe 100 My Main Office is not his normal job. Maybe he works, at ABC building. So if his ABC building is where he normally works, but he came over to the My Main Office job to fill in a couple extra hours, as you go throughout the week, depending on your OT rules, if it's on a standard 40-hour work week, on Friday, that job that he's working at that a particular moment of that 40-hour hit is going to start accumulating that overtime. So the benefit of using OT Move, it allows you to now tell the system, if this guy gets overtime, this employee gets overtime, let's make sure that the OT appears on the job that I want instead of the job the system's automatically just going to assume you want it on. So it makes a big difference using OT Move as a kind of a back-end option there if you ever need to kind of control where the OT is going to fall. Now, on the flip side of OT Move, if you should not use OT Move, or kind of the next process that will flow into as it relates to overtime, is that we have a function setting in the system that basically allows overtime to automatically go to an employee's non-default job. Now, a few of you on this phone call have expressed concern that when you go to your time sheets, you're noticing that the OT is falling on jobs that kind of happen earlier in the week instead of how the natural progression of the week should go. And this typically happens because we have a setting in the system, and I'll show you here on the next slide, that allows you to now give priority to non-default jobs when calculating overtime. This is a setting that we have set up automatically by default on all of the pay groups. And what that says is any employee working in that particular pay group hits overtime, the system will automatically treat that overtime and give priority to that overtime for any jobs that are not their default job. And this kind of from the thought process behind this is you have a lot of scenarios where we have a base job that an employee typically works. It's a contractual job. They're always working on that one job, or it's a base job that we have a set amount of hours and whatnot for that job. Then we ask people to stay late or work another job to cover for us and whatnot. And in those cases, they may be one-time jobs. They may be concerning issues where we may not necessarily have budgeted labor initially for those jobs. So in those cases, this setting makes sure that the overtime goes to those non-priority jobs, because we don't want the time normally hitting his normal job, because once again, it might not be a job that we've budgeted for properly. Now, more so with that, if you go through here, kind of what it's saying is the default job is based on what's set up in Blueforce, which comes from J.D. Edwards. So that's why one of the things we always harp on is make sure that J.D. Edwards is set up correctly. So when Blueforce's record is updated or created initially, it's got that information ready to go. So for Mr. Edward here on this particular job, his default job is 100 My Main Office in this example. But he can work any of those jobs at the bottom right-hand corner of this screen under working jobs. So he can work any of those jobs, but let's say he gets overtime on that second job, 102 Whataburger. He happens to be doing some stripping and waxing the floors there at that particular restaurant for whatever reason, and has to work a couple extra hours. Typically what happens is if he were to hit overtime, that setting would ensure that the non-default job, which in this case is that Whataburger job, would get that overtime. And that's because, once again, of that one setting. So this setting, once again, is simply called OT, basically making priority for non-default jobs to get the overtime first. So give me 1 second. I have a question. Let me read this. So I have a user has a question that I'm probably not going to be able to answer kind of offhand. I'm not understanding it, but um, this user had an employee with zero point 0.5 OT with above base work or AB work, as they say on the HP side, um, and then it had AB work also in the morning. So the system actually put in two overtimes, both at zero point 0.5, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the timesheet, this was shown on the timesheet. So I'm not sure what the exact question is here, but typically if the system's automatically generating some of this stuff, there's a lot of things also, other factors that could be involved, and we have to keep those in play. Kind of talking from an overtime perspective, keep in mind we have the rules that dictate the federal and state laws for overtime that are always running. And then from that, if we actually go in and actually tinker with OT move, that could affect a little bit. And lastly, if we go in there and actually let the system kind of flow on its own, it's going to actually look at its non-priority job. So to kind of go a little bit further with the statement that was made here, I kind of would need to know a little bit more as to what the jobs were and maybe the employees who kind of look that up. The one thing I did not mention that kind of falls into this as well is some of the pay differentials, because we might be able to dictate some of that as well, kind of part of the rule and kind of the big picture. So a lot of things there. I apologize, I can't really answer that statement, but we can, if we get some more information, I can probably circle back on that in a little bit. So kind of want to just go through those little pieces with you, just kind of go through the way overtime is calculating. Obviously, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, is we do have some federal, state, and obviously union rules that kind of dictate everything for that. But once we have those in place, we have the opportunity to use that OT move to kind of control where the overtime is going to hit. There is no rule, and I think one of the big misnomers kind of around the country is there is no rule that says the overtime has to be at the end of the week or after the 40 hours. Using OT move is perfectly legal in that we basically tell the system we want the overtime to hit on certain days or certain extra jobs an employee worked. That's perfectly legal. The only thing is, obviously, is we can't be, how do I put this? We can't be obviously shorting the employee because we don't want to pay the overtime. I mean, obviously, that's kind of the root of that conversation. So that's the overtime piece. And once again, just want to point out those little settings that we have in the system now. So let's go on to our next topic, and our next topic is revolving around the reprocessing of timesheets. And I want to bring this up because from time to time we do have some concerns where an employee, employee was not paid at the proper rate, pay rate, or something involving the general setup of the employee, as it revolves around the pay rate or pay group does not apply to the time. And that typically happens during this process of reprocessing timesheets. Now, kind of what I said with the OT method, I'm going to use that kind of as an example here. When you punch into the time card, your rules, the OT rules don't actually apply until the time kind of flows over to the timesheet view. And that's because of those paired punches. Once you have a paired punch system, then says, all right, now I know what to do with this time. We have valid time. Let me go and apply those rules or whatnots to that time. Same thing with anything else in the system, the shift differentials, the pay rates, anything you have in the system goes through that same kind of queue, and the timesheets are always looking for time that's popping in and processing any rules as they apply. Now, one of the things with reprocessing timesheets is, and kind of the purpose of this whole piece is just to make sure that the recent pay rate changes and pay rules are in play. Okay, this can be done at any time, and it's basically a good kind of final check that should be done before submitting your timesheets. And it's just like a final check. It's not going to hurt for you to click that little link and let it run. I'm actually going to log in. I'm going to show you how to do this on your own, because this is actually a step that makes a difference. Typically, the timesheets are always out there validated, and you really don't need to always do this. But I'll give you a scenario. If you were to call us today and say, you know what, my timesheets are ready to be submitted, however, I noticed that there is an issue with a pay differential. Tiandra and I would go into that pay differential, fix it for you, and then ask you, or we will do it. But if we ask you, we'll say, go and reprocess your timesheets now to see if the updates, the rate's now updated. What the reprocessing timesheets does, it goes out and looks at all the different payrolls that are available or set up for that particular job in question. And then you have the opportunity from this link, that I'm going to show you here momentarily, to actually tell the system, don't want to just update everything, just write, just the rates, what exactly do I want to update? And all the system does is not necessarily making changes, but if we do change a pay differential, for example, and say, if you work between 12 and 6, you get an additional $1 to your pay. That rule was not in place while the time was being collected by Blueforce. If it was, the system would automatically apply that for you. If we kind of go after the fact into a timesheet that's not yet submitted and approved or exported, obviously, we can actually force that rule to update via reprocessing timesheets process. So once again, if there's ever an issue where you see something not quite right, just don't submit and approve and let's push it through. We can always, or I would ask you first, to go in and click on reprocess timesheets, make sure that the system updates all the payrolls and pay rates and all that good stuff. If there's still an issue, Tiandra and I can jump in, kind of intervene with that. We can also fix and reprocess, and we can obviously get this issue corrected. So kind of real quick, let me go in and show you. I'm going to go into my timesheet view. And kind of when I click on timesheets here, it's going to ask me for a job to pick. So I'm going to actually pick let's pick a good job that's actually in use. Give me 1 second. Let's use this job. So kind of from that perspective, I picked one job. It's a job out of our Houston office. And if you look here on this particular view, you do have, a couple options. You have open punches. You've got tells you the pay period, tells you the number of hours and whatnot. But at the very far right, there is an option called request reprocessing. And that request reprocessing link allows you to do this function I'm talking about. Once again, it's not going to hurt anything. It doesn't hurt you to go in there and try it. If I click on it, you do have the opportunity now to either reprocess all open punches, reprocess all employees, or refresh only rates. So if for some reason, hypothetically, let's say, an employee had punched in on Monday of last week. We're doing payroll today. Now it's Tuesday this week. Monday of last week, and had a $10 an hour rate. However, during this period, we update the pay rates for this employee on Thursday, and on Thursday and Friday's time, he has a $12 an hour rate. The system is going to hold on to whatever that employee initially clocked in as, so you may have to come in here and refresh your rates. Or like I mentioned, the pay differential. If we go in there and set up a pay differential rule that wasn't existing at the time the employee actually punched in and punched out, we can always set up that rule, go back and refresh or reprocess that timesheet. Now keep in mind, the timesheet is only good for that week, and we can only reprocess timesheets up to the beginning of the pay period. So if it's a weekly pay period, we can only go back a week, or that current week that you're on, or obviously bi-weekly, we can go back 2 weeks. But that is a reprocessing timesheet. It just gives you the opportunity now to reprocess any rules that are out there. Now in this one, you're going to see any changes because I'm not going to make a change to this one. But if I hit save, just click reprocess all employees and hit save, you'll notice that on the far right hand side where that link was, it says request queued. And then this request queue will stay like that for maybe for 20 seconds or so. If you don't want to wait for it to just update itself, you can always back out of the screen and come back into it. I'm going to click on timesheets again at the top of the screen just to clear. And let me clear my circle there. Oh, there it goes. It says request reprocessing again. So once it returns back to that request reprocessing link, it's done. It's gone through. It's looked at all those rules as it applies to this particular job and applied those changes to any employees they met that criteria. So reprocessing timesheets is just kind of a way to force the updates to come a little quicker if anything's been done kind of after the fact from the system setup. So that's really all I have on reprocessing timesheets. Just a quick little discussion because that's something that benefits everyone to do. Once again, if you are unfortunately, the only ones that can actually request the reprocessing are your submitters and approvers. The editors don't have the rule to do that. All right. So alerts. Let's talk about alerts now. So alerts are probably one of the things that's not really utilized right now in the system as much as it should be. And kind of being so, we haven't really focused on alerts being one of the key things we wanted to start from day one. However, and being on the system now for over a year, in most sites, it's time to go to the step 2 and step 3 down the road here of other things we can do out of Blueforce. Now, alerts benefits everybody. So if you're an editor, submitter, or approver on this phone call, you can go and use the alerts functionality. So what are Blueforce alerts? Blueforce alerts are basically real-time alerts that are basically designed to help you solve the problems proactively and control your labor costs. Now, two things there. Problems proactively issues are basically any issues revolving around your employees, maybe not being on site, not showing up, not having enough people to cover your shift. And then control labor costs. Anything to do with budgets, anything to do with scheduling, stuff of that nature, we can set up an alert for. Now, there are a number of different email or text message alerts to choose from, and they all are set up right in Blueforce. And you have the opportunity now, like I mentioned, for email, it's just a standard email address, whatever we have on the system file there for you, the system will automatically email that alert for you. Or via text message. If you don't want to be alerted or you want to be alerted both ways, you could set up a text message in the system to automatically alert you that when send to you when this alert gets kicked off. Two examples there are at vtext.com and at sprintpcsmessaging.com. Those are your Verizon and Sprint users. If you know your phone, if you're AT&T or T-Mobile or any other provider, they all have a specific, it looks like an email address, but it's a specific address for those text messages that we'll need to get that information to be able to do this as a text message. Now, with the alerts, there are basically 10 current alerts in the system. I'm going to go through a couple of these in the setup functionality, kind of a demo mode, showing you how to get this going for your location. So the alerts, there's 10 available currently, and like I said earlier, editors, submitters, and approvers can configure these as needed. So kind of going through the list here, I'll just kind of give you a little synopsis on a couple of these that are more popular. First off, the minimum employee alert option is about halfway down, by number 6 on the list. Minimum employee alerts allow you to know if you have enough people at the site. So for example, I can tell Blueforce that between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. I need to have 10 people at my site. If I have less than 10, I need to be notified via email or text. That's a popular one because we now know if someone's late or if we don't have enough people covering the shifts they're at the site that night. Now the other one that's typically popular is the critical employee alert, the fourth one down. That one allows you to go in and set up a specific employee. Maybe it's a supervisor or the person who has the keys to the building, whatever it may be. If they have not punched into Blueforce within a given time frame, maybe this person needs to be there between 8 and 9 in the morning because he opens up the building for everybody. If he's not there by 9, at 9 o'clock you'll get an alert saying that so-and-so is not available at the building yet. So obviously, A, you know he's late, but more importantly, you know that no one else can get in the building because he's not there. So those are the two popular ones. But let's go through a couple of these. Accident alert. Right now we don't have that turned on. We're about to get that probably going here in the next couple of months. But the accident alert allows you to know if someone has had an accident on the site. Now, one of the functionalities we have in Blueforce is the Walter devices. The Web Punch is going to have the functionality here in the next couple of months. It's kind of where the delay is on that. But the Mobile Punch, and as well as a phone-in, all four methods are going to be able to prompt the employee at the end of the shift if they had a safe work day or if they had an accident or whatnot. So depending on their answer, could kick off an alert to you, letting you know that someone's been injured, and you don't have to find out about it a week later. You can find out immediately when they actually answer that question. Budget amounts and budget hours, those alerts work now, and those are based on the budget amounts that actually got loaded from JD Edwards. So you can kind of tell your actual versus your budget amount of hours in the system. Late device alert you won't really need out there in the field, but you're more than welcome to set one up. That's kind of typically for myself and Tiana to use, but that allows us to know if a time clock has gone offline and has not communicated back in a given amount of time. So if you want to set up your time clock, so if you know you have an issue with the time clock, you want to keep up and see if someone is not communicating in a certain amount of time, that's an alert for you. New employee alerts, not too critical, but if you want to know when you get a new employee set up at your job site, it'll kick you off a alert. Typically, new employees are set up obviously via JD Edwards. So once it hits Blueforce, boom, you get an alert saying you someone is now available in Blueforce. Job overtime and pay group overtime, just like that, you can tell the system, let me know if someone is, and from a job perspective, if someone is over 40 hours in a week. As a pay group, you can also do that and kind of get that as a bigger group setting to find out and monitor overtime. And then meal break alert, if someone did not clock out for a break, and this really only works for those scenarios. Well, it does work for the auto as well, but this one's one that's a little harder to maintain because someone can punch in and punch out, but if someone doesn't take a break after so much time, for example, we tell the system after 4 hours we want someone to go to lunch or take this meal break. We can set up a rule in there that says, after the 4 hours, if they have not applied it, send me alerts. That way I can go and call them and say, hey, I need you to take a break now. You're not going to skip out on lunch today, whatever it may be. But all of these 10 alerts are available right now for you to go in there and set up as needed. And once again, only editors, submitters, and approvers can do this. Now, once again, the real-time alerts always work. The key thing to keep in mind is their work based on the time collected in Blueforce. So what I mean by that is phone-in, mobile punch, and web punch are live systems. So the minute you punch in, within seconds, those punches are recorded over in Blueforce. However, the Walter clocks, the time clocks, they work on a sync schedule. So those times, once again, if someone punches in on those clocks, there might be a little larger delay to get an alert on those sites because most clocks currently sync 8 times daily at those particular times, 3, 9, 11, 1, 3, 5, 9, and 11 p.m. again. The LAN clocks, the ones that are connected straight to a network connection at the sites, those are all set up to auto-sync every 5 minutes or within 5 minutes of a punch recorded, so when someone punches in, punches out. So if you have a clock that is maybe on a wireless technology like cell or Wi-Fi, those are probably be the ones that are going to have a little issue in getting you a real-time alert. You'll get the alert, you just won't get it right when that threshold is met. So, but like I mentioned, so most popular thus far, and I would recommend everyone going in there and setting some up, are your minimum employee alerts and then your critical employee alerts. So what's going to happen is once an alert is achieved, essentially an alert is triggered off based on the criteria that we've set up, the system is going to send you a notification via email if you chose the email route. It's going to look very similar to this. So my first email that I have, I set up this morning for you, just kind of go through and show you this. The first one is telling me in my subject line right off the bat, my main office, which is my job 100, is missing a required employee. What that means is I set up that employee using that critical employee alert. So Mr. J here didn't appear, so it's telling you down here at the bottom that I told it a time frame for this employee. And once again, I'll show you this setup real quickly, how to do this. But this particular employee was set up to be at the site between 9:30 and 10. He failed to be there between that time frame, therefore it triggered this first alert. The second alert was triggered because I had no employees punched in for that particular job within a given time frame. So if I look it down on the email, if I open up my email, it's actually going to tell me a little bit more information, but it's going to tell me more specifically that between this time frame of 9:30 to 10, I told the system I needed to have 20 employees, and right now I only have 0 punched in. So I have 20 employees that decided not to show up this morning, or maybe they're locked out because the critical employee is not there. Something's going on at that site. I need to go address it immediately. So once again, this is the email notification site. I apologize, I don't have a screenshot of the text message. The text message works very similar. It's going to let you know via text that you are missing somebody or you're short a couple employees. And once again, this is just the real-time alert examples that are out there. So let me revert now over to Blueforce real fast, and I'm going to go in and show you where these alerts are set up. So what you would do initially is from the main screen, so when you log in, you do have an option down at the bottom right, and it's simply called Alerts, right here with a big exclamation point. Alerts is where you go and set up any of the 10 alerts that I just mentioned on the screen. And that's the first thing you're going to actually be prompted after you pick your jobs that you want to work with. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to use my test jobs that I have in here. I don't want to go and use any live jobs. But I pick my jobs that I want to work with. This is going to take me to the 10 alerts right off the bat. So now you have the ability to tell the system, I want to set up a specific alert. In this case, I'm going to do the minimum employee alert. And when I click on it, it's going to show me any alert that I am either set up for or any alerts that that are basically involving the jobs that I've currently selected on the left-hand side. Now, I'm logged in as my submitter role, and I can guarantee you that I did not set up this rule that's showing up in the middle of the screen. But the reason I do see it is because I have access to job 100, and it's part of the job selection on the left-hand side of the screen. So don't panic if you see something on there that's not yours directly. It's just letting you know that it's there. Now you do have ability as this user. I am the submitter role. As this user, I have the opportunity now. If I'm getting tired of getting the messages every day because someone is not there on time. If I come in here, I can always click on unsubscribe, and it takes me, just my user account, out of that mix. It won't affect anybody else. The unsubscribe is strictly just for that user that's currently selected. So if you look over to the right, you'll see that I have 2 recipients. I have myself, and I have another one called Webinar Submitter, which is the one I'm using right now. So if I click on unsubscribe, which I'm not going to do right now, but if I click on unsubscribe, it'll take me off of this list and only leave one recipient behind. Now, the way these alerts work is very simple. Every alert has an option to click on that's going to basically be an add new alert function. When I click on add new alert, that now opens up the screen to allow me to key in the criteria for my alert. So when I click on add new alert, this one is the minimum employee alert, and every alert looks very similar with a gray screen. Looks pretty plain. I mean, this is a pretty plain part of the system. But the very top always tells you what alert you're working on, so you don't forget. You do have an opportunity at the very bottom to either save or cancel, so don't think that just because I'm working on the screen I have to continue. I can just hit cancel and all be not, like I never did this. I never was even here. But regardless, if I go in to minimum employees alert, I tell the system that I can generate an alert when, and you have all your jobs selected there. Now all the jobs shown that you previously selected. Once again, that goes from the left-hand column. This is basically the jobs that I selected when I told the system these are the jobs I want to work with. So from here, I can go and pick the jobs that I want to work with. In this case, let's say I want to generate an alert for Alamo Cafe, in which I say any employee is punched in for any task, or I can a specific task. So if you want to know when a supervisor is on site, I can actually choose the cleaning supervisor task. If you don't really care about a specific task, you want to say any task. You don't care who it is. I just need to have 5 people there. Then you can use any task. This gives you some flexibility so that you get alerted to the proper task, that you have the proper people and staff at the site. With that, there's the next option is to click on Add Row. When I click on Add Row, it gives me the ability now to tell the system what day I want to look at specifically. So keep in mind, I have days of the week. The reason it's a day of the week, not a specific numbered date, is because it wants to be able to replicate that week to week. So if I go on Monday and say on Mondays, I want to make sure that I have 5 people between this time and this time. Next Monday, it's going to keep the same setting, and so forth until you go back here and edit that rule. So in saying that, I'm going to say today is Tuesday. Now, one thing about this rule is I can't go back right now and say I want to create a rule between 1400, which is I'm in Central Time Zone right now, so it's 2:47 my time. I can't go back in here and say I want to set up a rule between 1400 and 1500. And I can't do it because that's the time frame that's currently active in the system. I mean, right now it's overlapping the time frame for today. So if I set that up in here, it's not going to trigger anything because, once again, these alerts don't go active until I hit save. But secondly, you're kind of in the middle of the time frame. So anything that happened between 2 o'clock and now, which is the last 47 minutes, is not going to be accounted for in your count. So you got to keep that in mind. You can't create a rule during the time frame that you're currently in right now. But I can go in there and say I want to put a rule here that says from 1500, so from 3 o'clock Central to, and once again, these are local time. So if you are in California, obviously right now in Crane 1, you'll be at 1300 to 1400, whatever it may be for your example. The next fields are minimum employees. So you're going to tell the system how many employees must you have punched in during that time frame. So if I say 5 here, if I have 4 employees, 3 employees, 2 employees, 1 employee, 0 employees, whatever it may be, anything less than 5, the system is going to send me an alert. If I have 5 employees punched in, it's not going to send me anything. And if I have more than 5, it's not going to send me anything either because the minimum is 5. Once I have it filled out, I hit save. The system will save my information here. You'll see Tuesdays listed there. I can go back and add more rows for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every day of the week. Even within that, I can do another Tuesday, maybe a different time frame. Maybe I want to go in here and put Tuesday now, and I want to put a time frame of, I want to make sure I have 5 people between 10 and 11. Same thing again. I can go in there and build that. As long as your time frames do not overlap each other, you're not going to have an issue with this. So you continue to do that. And at the very bottom, you have an option to click on Add Remove Managers. Now, Add Remove Managers, this little section here, allows you to pick all the different managers that are available for this job. Now, if I go in here and click on Add Remove Managers, I have the ability now to pick the different managers that are in there. Let's see. So I'm using this one. It's called Webinar Submitters, the example I'm using. But I found myself on the list, and I click Assign to now make it official. So I hit OK. The system's automatically going to know that if any alert needs to be triggered between these particular criteria, between 5 and 4, between 3 and 4, if I don't have at least 5 employees, at 4:01 p.m., it's going to send a message to that particular user. Now, keep in mind the section that I just selected as a user, my name is, or my user account as the manager here, is going to be basically an email. It says right here, send emails to that particular manager. Now, you have some opportunities here. You can go in here and put some settings here if you want it to say certain things in the subject line, or if you wanted to say, the whole address for you in the email body. You can do that. You just check those boxes. Now, if you don't want to actually do the email route, you want to actually have it texted to you, down at the bottom, I can go in here and put in my particular email/SMS address. So you can hard code an email address in there if you want to, but typically that's where you put your texting address. And once I'm done there, I hit save, and my setting is now complete. And I'm not going to save this one, but actually I will save it. And once I do save it there, you will see it update and now be available on this screen. Now keep in mind here, look at the difference on the left-hand column. You have an option for unsubscribe on the last one, but the first one you have edit, delete, and unsubscribe as well. Now what that basically tells you is unsubscribe only means that I was not the one that set it up. Someone else set it up and put my name on it. The option that has edit, delete on it, allow me now to go back and edit and delete this rule because I was the one that actually created it for the system or for other users in the system. So that would be the only limitation, is that you can't go back in there and edit or delete someone else's. But if you need assistance with that, obviously put in a help desk ticket and either myself or Tiana can assist you with that removal of a alert. Now, one other one I'm going to show you for this particular call, and we'll wrap it up for today, is the critical employee alert that I mentioned earlier. And the critical employee alert, same as the minimum. The only difference is now we're going to actually go in and add a new alert, and we're going to actually tell the system to generate an alert when a specific employee on a specific job is not there. So in this case, I pick U.S. Airways hangar, and I can say if it doesn't have a specific employee on the list, notice all the employees that are pop up on here. These are all the employees that can work that job. So that's why the list is rather long. But if Jose Flores is my employee that I want to focus on because he's the guy that has the keys to the building, he's the supervisor there on site, or the foreman or the lead or whatever you want to call him, and he's not there, then I need to pay attention as to know what's going on. So in this case, the system will generate an alert when this employee has not punched in on, let's say he is set up for Tuesday, and everyone at the building needs to be there at 5 o'clock, but we tell him he needs to be there at 4 to be ready to go. So let's give him a little window there to say if he's not clocked in between that time and that time. Now, the way that time frame also works is if he gets there at 17:01, he wasn't there within that range. So therefore, the system's going to say he's not there. So you got to keep that in mind as well. If he's a little late, you're still going to get that message saying that he wasn't there. Same thing as continuing on, add remove managers. You do the same thing. Go to add remove managers, pick your manager on site, or you go to the bottom of the screen into that enter email/SMS address area, and key in whatever address you want to send to. So if I wanted to just hard code my address in here, I can do that. Obviously, this is my ISS address, so I can go in there and hard code that there as well. Hit save, and the system will now show it. I'm not going to save this one, but it will show it here as another alert that's set up. I'm not going to save it because I have plenty of alerts that are getting sent to me within every hour now. So regardless, that's what that will do. Now, one thing that each of these alerts also lets you know is from a big picture or quick glance. These are the days of the week that's affected. So the alert that I have currently running on the system here would not run on Sunday, Monday, Friday, or Saturday. So keep that in mind. So don't be expecting an alert to run on a day that you've not intended to select it or set up for. So those are the two cool alerts that I would ask everyone to go out there and give it a try and set up some alerts for yourself. There's other alerts there you're more than welcome to tinker with. If you have any questions about those other alerts, obviously just put in a help desk ticket, and either Tiana or myself will get back to you on finding out what exactly we want to do about those alerts or kind of put you in the right direction. So kind of with that, we kind of wrapped up our call for today, and I just want to point out two things that are coming up. Upcoming training tomorrow, we have the Blueforce scheduling webinar. This is the one we're kind of doing now on a once a month kind of basis. Since our attendance has kind of gone lower on that one, so mostly everyone's already joined and done scheduling. But if you need a scheduling class, you want to learn more about the Blueforce schedules, tomorrow is the day, 1 p.m., same channel per se. And then also the next week, we'll be offering on the following Wednesday, we'll be offering a Blueforce Basics webinar. And that's basically a good chance for any reviewers to get involved. So those individuals that just have a reviewer role, that may just be on a time clock. And then also those that are submitters, editors, and approvers also will benefit, because we'll go through the process of learning how to edit punches and do some basic time card approval. So basics class is the following Wednesday at 1 p.m. So with that, I want to say thank you again for joining us on our webinar. Webinars are held every Tuesday and Thursday, these particular ones. So if you want to come back on Thursday, we'll have the same topics again. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week, either on Tuesday or Thursday. So as always, suggestions, let me know if there's something else you want to hear specifically or a topic you want to talk about. Just email me directly those, and we'll get those included on next week's webinar. With that, thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you again real soon.